Hi there, Martin Popoff back again for Overkill Rewind. Just to remind you what Overkill Rewind is about, of course, we put out a call to votes. We ask you, our very smart viewers, to vote on what are the top 5 albums of a specific year. So this Overkill Rewind is a bit of a special one. We are going back to 1970. Now why this is special is we've kind of gotten together with the cabal here at Banger and we've figured out that this may be the very first one of these we do. We kind of figure this is a crazy important year in heavy metal. You know, we can argue the dribs and drabs of what happens before this. We've got a couple of Led Zeppelin albums before this. We've got Blue Cheer, we've got Jimi Hendrix and Cream, we've got the Stooges starting up, MC5. But, you know, we've, even before we started today, we kind of had a little discussion saying, you know, these things, we can always argue that they aren't really that persistently perfect as heavy metal albums. Maybe some of these things have a little bit more of a grounding towards psych or towards punk. So 1970, we're kind of looking at this as the banner year when all of this starts out. My personal memories of 1970, I don't really have any because I was only, 7 years old at that point. I wasn't a huge music fan at that point, but by, I'd say 1974, I had all of these albums or was aware of all of these records. I am a crazy music fan and I became a crazy music fan pretty early, but not 1970. 1970 in terms of a big year, I mean, this is the year that the Beatles were officially, Paul McCartney announced that they were broken up. Let It Be came out as a final album. Jimi Hendrix died 1970, late 1970, I believe, September. Janis Joplin died as well in this year. I also consider it the year when prog really gets going, although, you know, prog does definitely have a couple of albums that go back to 1969. So there you go, 1970. Pretty important year, a nice tidy year to start for heavy metal. I love this whole topic. I actually did a book on this called Who Invented Heavy Metal. It's 120,000 words that ends in 1971. We won't get into why I took it into 1971, but the brunt of this book is all about a lot of these records that we're going to talk about today. We have a tie for number 5. 2 records. We have Led Zeppelin III and Uriah Heep, Very Heavy, Very Umble, or in the States, it was called just Uriah Heep. So the Led Zeppelin, let's talk about that briefly first of all. I totally disagree with this one. I don't think this should be in here, and there's good reason for this. When this came out, people were shocked that it was more or less an acoustic album. It's not very heavy. Certainly, you know, there's a lot more credence one can put on Led Zeppelin I and Led Zeppelin II, both from 1979. They're heavier, they're older, and they have some really good proto-metal on them. So Led Zeppelin is definitely a big part of this conversation, but not in 1970. This is kind of weird to have them here. I love this album personally. It's my second favorite Led Zeppelin album after Physical Graffiti. Basically, it's got 3 heavy songs on it. 3 heavy songs really with full amplification and drums and distorted, you know, distortion pedal on a guitar, etc. Celebration Day, Immigrant Song, and Out on the Tiles. Celebration Day, love it. Out on the Tiles, love it. But nobody really talks about them as important in the invention of metal. Immigrant Song, on the other hand, has got this kind of Viking theme, and it's a little bit thrashy, and it's got Robert Plant doing those ahs in it and all that kind of stuff. So Immigrant Song is a pretty important song in the invention of metal. But no, I don't think this record belongs here. I think it's almost like a placeholder to put in, hey, we got to put some Led Zeppelin in here. In terms of a skull rating, I am going to give this 5 out of 5 skulls because I love it so much, but it's more like 5 out of 5 roses. It doesn't deserve very many skulls at all. It deserves about 2 skulls. But if we're going to be official, I have to say 5 out of 5 skulls. Uriah Heep 1. This is a super important album in the invention of metal. It's really heavy, it's well produced. Uriah Heep is sounding very much like Deep Purple at this point. They've got that same sort of heavy guitar and Hammond organ sound. You know, they stormed onto the scene. This album's out on Vertigo. They did pretty well right out of the gates. It's got probably one of the best songs of everything that we're going to talk about today, Gypsy. But one big problem with it is there is a song called Lucy's Blues, which is on the UK version. But that gets replaced by Bird of Prey on the American version, which is probably even better than Gypsy. It's amazing. It's a great early heavy metal song. It's got Walking in Your Shadow on it, and Real Turned On, some other Dream Mare. It's got some really good heavy stuff on it, and heavy Hammond organ, like I say, and it's got great production. So it totally deserves to be here. Well, you're the guys who voted for all this. Everything deserves to be here because this is you doing this and just me commenting, right? But no, I think it's one of the key records in the invention of heavy metal. So in terms of a skull rating, let me think. So I'm going to go So you know what? I'm going to go with 4 out of 4 skulls for the UK version. I'm going to go with 5 out of 5 for the US version, just because of Bird of Prey. Go listen to Bird of Prey. It's amazing. So number 4 is Lucifer's Friend by Lucifer's Friend. Very cool choice here. I love that when we do this, there's often, I remember we did 1984, and I think we had Merciful Fate come in there, which is really cool. We've had some great oddball choices that shows how smart you people are as metalheads. So this is one of those. This is an album that made no impact at the time. It's basically a total underground album, but it's really heavy for 1970, and it's really well done. It's got a great recording. This is a German band. They did get US distribution. This record came out on Billingsgate, but it's a German band, and they would be even more forgotten had they not got an English singer on top of it. So they put John Lawton in there. Great singer. Obviously he's English, so there's no distraction about English as a second language here, but the rest of the band is all German. Interestingly, John Lawton eventually went on to be in Uriah Heep, and this record sounds very Uriah Heepy. So it's a great choice. It's got a song in there called Ride the Sky that stands out the way Immigrant Song stood out on Led Zeppelin III, really. But the rest of it's really heavy too. But it's got a little bit of psych to it. It's got a little bit of blues. It's a little bit jammy. There's just this tiny bit of datedness that I'm not going to ascribe to some of the other choices as we move forward into 3, 2, and 1. So for that reason, Lucifer's Friend, I'm going to solidly give this 4 out of 5 skulls and not go the full 5 on this one. Number 3 is Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. Killer choice. Might be a little surprising. It's not higher, but we'll get to that. So this record is pretty much the #1 most important album in the invention of heavy metal. It came out February 13th, a Friday, 1970 on Vertigo. It instantly made quite a splash. I think people realized right away that this is something very, very different. It's the first time you get overt horror lyrics. You get the tritone, the Diablos in Musica, characterized by that opening song, Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath, so great they had to name it 3 times. There's other super heavy songs on this, The Wizard, Wicked World. The Wicked World, interesting, on the UK version, we get a cover of Crow's Evil Woman, Don't You Play Those Games With Me. When this came out in the US, they replaced that by Wicked World, which I think is an improvement. So this record comes in crazy, crazy important. It essentially is the #1 album that most people would agree who have thought about this a lot, that is the #1 album that invents heavy metal. So it's crazy important for that. Now, why is it number 3? I think it's number 3 because it is a little bit jammy, it's a little bit meandering, it's got some long songs on it. It's got a long cover on it by Ainsley Dunsbar Retaliation called The Warning, which, depending on how you count, long story, there's all this renumbering of the songs and adding stuff. It's either 10 minutes long or 14 minutes long anyways. I'm kind of going to agree with the viewers here in a controversial way. You guys have voted it number 3, which is a little controversial, but I'm going to go a little controversial and give the UK version of this album 4 out of 5 skulls because it has 2 covers, and I hate when bands do covers. It's usually not up to them. It's usually the label telling them to do this stuff. For the American version, I'm going to go 5 out of 5 because they did replace it with Wicked World, which is another killer early heavy metal song. I'm not going to say proto-heavy metal because we are into heavy metal at this point. This is a heavy metal album. So we're up to number 2 in our top 5 heavy metal albums of 1970. What's it going to be? Well, I'll tell you what it's going to be. It's Deep Purple in Rock. Love this choice. Great choice. There's no way this was going to be missed. Obviously, this is no surprise. What's incredible about this record is I've contended before that probably this is the best and actually the most modern heavy metal album of 1970. Black Sabbath had a couple albums out in 1970. I think this is the better album. But it doesn't get talked about as much as the first Black Sabbath because it comes 6 months later. This came out June 3rd, 1970. Now, the funny thing about Deep Purple is they had 3 kind of psychedelic albums earlier than this, and then they had this wacky classical album. So this is actually their 4th album, but it is absolutely modern heavy metal. It's absolutely killer. Ritchie Blackmore, I remember Roger Glover told me this once as well, but I've seen it attributed to Ritchie Blackmore. The mandate here was they said, if it's not exciting, it's not going on the album. So everything on this record is completely exciting. It's very new. Again, we've gone away from the blues. Heavy metal begins, another contention of mine, when you strip the blues out of it and you start adding these other things. The doom of Black Sabbath, the classical of Ritchie Blackmore and John Lord. So you hear classical out of both of these guys in terms of what they're doing in terms of their soloing and John Lord with the Hammond organ stuff. But yeah, this is a crazy, crazy heavy metal album. It only has one mellow song on it. Unfortunately, it's the longest one, Child in Time. I don't like it very much, but it is absolutely a classic. It has Hard Lovin' Man on it, which I consider almost the first thrash song. It's got a very staccato machine gun kind of thing on it. Speed King, Bloodsucker, Livin' Wreck, totally heavy record. So for that reason, and because it's just so well done, I'm gonna go with 5 out of 5 skulls for Deep Purple in rock. Okay, we're up to number 1 for top heavy metal album of 1970 as voted on by you, our viewers. We have Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Great choice. It's kind of cool seeing how this list played out. I mean, the list itself is more or less pretty predictable, but I love the way these jockey into position. Black Sabbath Paranoid is Black Sabbath's second album, and it's their second album of 1970. It's coming out in late 1970. But great improvements all around, and also great improvement in this idea of inventing this brand new type of music, coming kind of out of left field, as I said, leaving the British blues boom behind, bringing in classical, bringing in doom, just proud to be heavy metal by having lots and lots of heavy metal on the record. I mean, this has Planet Caravan, which is a crazy, quiet stoner song. But other than that, everything's pretty rocking on this record. I did a book called recently called Riff Raff, the top 250 heavy metal songs of the 70s, and Paranoid won Best Song. So we have the greatest song, really, of all of the 70s as voted on in Paranoid. But we also have Fairies Wear Boots. We have War Pigs, which is a great big classic. Crazy doomy, scary things like Hand of Doom on this. Killer record. Everybody loves it. Black Sabbath's already big stars by this point. They're touring America. The first Black Sabbath record only went gold. This record is Black Sabbath's biggest selling record. It's 4 times platinum in the States. So we have on our list definitely the biggest record out of all of them in Black Sabbath Paranoid. So, I absolutely will not cause a riot and go any lower on my grades on this. Unfortunately, I have this argument all the time with people. Paranoid is nowhere near my favorite Black Sabbath record. I personally love Sabotage and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and even Master of Reality better. But I have to go with 5 skulls out of 5 skulls for Black Sabbath Paranoid. So there you go. Those are our top 5. We have some other honorable mentions. Let me just take a little refresher here. Sir Lord Baltimore's Kingdom Come. This is one of those records that often gets talked about, by the music intellectuals, the music snobs, as a great record. This is an American band. I personally don't think it's that great or that heavy, and it doesn't deserve the reputation it has. It's pretty cool, but it's not amazing. Another honorable mention, we have the very first album by UFO. Again, I really don't think this belongs here. UFO, to me, doesn't really get going until Mike Schenker joins the band for Phenomenon. So this is the Mick Bolton era. They're kind of like this distorted, bluesy, caveman-esque, post-British blues boom band. It's not that heavy. It's almost punky and bluesy at the same time. Stooges' Funhouse, another one that gets a lot of votes, and it's kind of an important record. I mean, I think the first record in '69, The Stooges, is a little bit more, properly heavy metal, and it's more well disciplined. This is a really dirty, grungy, down and dirty album, but it's got some eccentricity to it with LA blues. It's really badly recorded. It's really, really gritty. I think it belongs a little bit more in the proto-punk category. And yes, one other honorable mention, we have Atomic Rooster with Death Walks Behind You. I mean, basically, Atomic Rooster's debut doesn't really get talked about very much, but this one does. It's pretty heavy, but again, it's a little bit too keyboardy, a little bit proggy, but it does, deserve to be mentioned. Now, normally, this is where I would talk also about, some things I think that miss the list, and there's really not very much. everything important got on the list. I had written down War Pig, War Pig. It's an obscure thing from Canada, not very heavy. You know, I think, again, the reputation is a little bigger than it should be. Cactus, Cactus, mountain climbing, a little bit heavy. An American thing, but a little bit too much blues to it. And we've got MC5 back in the USA, which, again, is not their heaviest album. It's probably the third heaviest of the three. We've got the first Hawkwind album, Asterix. But basically, everything important got into the list. It's kind of weird seeing that tie. It's cool seeing Lucifer's Friend in there. But no, we covered everything. So there you go. I mean, that's basically it. I think you guys nailed it on this one. You know, in the comments, tell us what you thought. Again, don't forget to subscribe. We also have the Patreon. And that's it for 1970. Hope you enjoyed it. See you again next time.